take it off for the night. We rock clouds every time we unite. Yeah, we got it like that. Kick drum, make your whole body go crack. Make the baseline move, take it off for the night.
Yes, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Heatcheck. I am your host, Jaydee, and look, there is so much NBA developments to catch you up on. But you know what's going to happen on this show. We're going to bring you the latest news. We still have to fill in with this latest debate about our newest entry into our all-time starting five. And of course, we're going to have 100% the realest debate. So joining me on the show today is a man whose autobiography I am really looking forward to reading, my guy, Ovie. Yeah, I cannot wait. I've seen little snippets online, and trust me, I know it's going to be a good read. And also, my brother, whose Twitter page yesterday sent me into a frenzy when you hyped up NBA 2K21 on PS5. Literally, shout out to my boy, Mumunsi. Look, gents, how is the new fame for you after our Sky Sports News debut?
I don't know about the fame. I know Ovie's used to it all the time. But, you know, for me, I was just grateful for the opportunity to kind of try and reach out to some fans who might not have seen our show before. Hopefully they're watching this episode. So if you are, big love to you. If you're new to the world of the NBA, stay tuned because we got a lot in store.
I had a good time, man. I enjoyed it. I think it was a great experience. All of us enjoyed it. I think I can speak for everyone on that note. But I hope we were able to, you know, allow some of the fans to see how genuine we are and how much fun we just have on set. So, yeah, it was a great experience.
Look, gents, like I said to you, it was great. It was great sharing that platform with you, but I have to catch you up with the latest news that's happening around the league. And the NBA has now approved the plan to return to Orlando for the season to resume on the 30th of July. Mo, I see you rubbing your hands because we're going to be at Disneyland. That's it. We're going to be in the Disneyland campus. And after discussions between the commissioner, board of governors, and the league owners, we can now confirm the 30th of July is the new date for the resumption of the season. Now, look, it's going to have a new format because the NBA has only invited back 22 teams, 13 from the West, 9 from the East, to compete for the potential 16, of course, playoff positions. Ovie, I want to come to you first. Understanding these new developments and also the potential of a play-in tournament, which we'll dive into later, what are you thinking now you have a set date for the return of the NBA season?
First off, I'm just extremely excited. Extremely happy that we can put a date on when the NBA is going to be back. There's been a whole bunch of anticipation, and just knowing that we'll be able to wrap up the season and crown a champion, I'm gassed up and excited for it. I think this new format, it switches things up. Obviously, there's a couple curveballs. A couple teams might not be happy, and a couple teams might have a little bit of an advantage. But overall, I'm really excited and really happy.
Mo, only 8 regular season games are going to be played out, obviously for the potential of those 16 playoff positions. I come to you with the insight that you have. How happy are you, first of all, that we're just going to get a return? And also talk about those curveballs that Ovie just touched upon.
I feel like, you know, when you're a kid and it's almost Christmas, it's like December the 1st and you say, all right, there's 25 days left and you're counting down every day. You're popping your advent calendar, getting ready for Christmas Day. That's how I feel waiting for the NBA to return because it's been so long. It's been 3 months now since the NBA was cancelled. It's going to be almost 4 months until we get the NBA back on our screens, which is like a whole off season. So, you know, I'm quite glad that the NBA have taken their time to find what they think will be the safest way to bring players back instead of rushing into it. So I think from that perspective, it's really good. But also the fact that 22 of the best teams in the NBA, they're going to be back on our screens. And I'm glad that we're not going straight into the playoffs because it just means extra basketball for us to enjoy.
Mo, it's so interesting that you talk about safety because as you could imagine, in the middle of a pandemic, players will still have concerns about safety. One of those players that's been open about speaking about whether or not he wants to return is Carmelo Anthony. And he's not alone. You're talking about maybe 40 to 50 players are all voicing their concerns about returning and being consumed in that bubble in Disney. I want to come to you, Mo, first and just ask you, from a player's perspective, can you see where they sort of have a leg to stand on? And also, do you feel like this could have a snowball effect?
I definitely do see where some of the players are coming from because with this entire situation, I don't think anyone really knows, you know, unless you're like a top scientist in the world. It's very hard to have all the facts about what truly is going on. But I would like the players to know that the NBA wouldn't do anything that would jeopardize their health or their well-being. I think a lot of the players who are showing more concern, I think a lot of them are ones with families, and because there's talks about bringing their spouses or girlfriends or partners and their kids potentially to the bubble that they're creating in Orlando. So, obviously, if you've got a family, you've got to have their interests at heart as well. And no one knows how it's going to play out. So I can understand why they're concerned, but I think the vast majority of players are extremely excited. These guys are athletes, they're competitors. Ovie will be able to tell you they're itching for the chance to get back on the court. And also with everything else going on in the world, I feel like a lot of these players will be able to use this platform now with everyone watching the playoffs and the tournament and playing games, etc. They'll be able to use that platform to bring attention to, the cause that we've been seeing with the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think will be fantastic.
Ovie, I do want to come to you from the player's perspective. Talk to us, because there is the urge, the competitive natural nature to want to compete, to want to play in the biggest opportunities. But at the same time, there's a health concern, surely. And do you understand why some of these players would not want to return?
I definitely understand it. It makes sense. Everyone's been in lockdown so far, pretty much around the world for good reason, because we are facing a pandemic, and obviously a lot of the players have been adhering to a lot of these guidelines also. But moving forward and trying to find a way to find some closure to the NBA this year, I think there has to be a little bit of give and take on both sides.
See, this is what I love about the NBA, because it's such an open format that people are really discussing every single possibility. And one of those things that they spoke about is the home court advantage. And now, guys, listen to me. There have been some proposals put. These aren't confirmed as of yet, but I do want to propose them to you. And you tell me which ones you like and which ones you don't like. Because naturally, with everybody being in this bubble in Orlando, you automatically lose the home court advantage. But these are some of the proposals that are being designated to the higher teams. So they're saying that one player will be allowed 7 fouls as the opposed, obviously, the traditional 6. I kid you not, they are flying in potentially the home court of the higher seeded teams. And so, giving the coaches a potential extra challenge as well. It goes on, honestly. They're talking about the higher seeded teams being awarded the first possession of the second, third, and fourth quarters following the traditional jump ball at the beginning of the game. And obviously, as we spoke about, more than anything else, the hotel selection. Like, they're saying that the higher seeded teams will get the opportunity to choose their hotels and choose their rooms first. Now, we spoke off camera, and some people were saying it's not a big deal. Some people were saying it is a big deal. I'm just telling you, some people have presidential suites, and you're a 6'7" basketball player stuck in a small bed. There's going to be some anger in there. So I want to hear from both of you. Ovie, come to me first. I need to know, which one of those do you like as proposals, and which ones do you think to yourself it's not really necessary?
I think moving the courts around, that's unnecessary. The NBA regulations, they make sure every single court is of great standard. So I don't really think that's going to give anyone a particular home court advantage. Sorry. But the biggest one for me is getting the ball at the beginning of the quarters. I definitely feel like possession at the beginning of the quarter, it could change the rhythm of the game. It could change the momentum. And it can keep momentum going. So out of all of the things that they've proposed, I definitely see that as being the biggest home court advantage.
Mo, there was a lot to list off there, but I know you're going to have opinions on each one. But which one stands out to you the most as being actual incentive for the higher seeded teams?
As much as I like the idea of starting the possessions, the second, third, and fourth quarters, I think that does somewhat reflect the extra possessions you might get from playing at home and having the fans screaming behind you, might inspire you to kind of dive for more loose balls or put pressure on the refs to give a certain quarter a certain way. But I don't think that, that changing the rules of the game is the way to go about this. And the other ones, as much as I'd love to see Marcus Smart be allowed to have 7 fouls, I don't think changing the rules of the game is the best way to go. The ones you listed, I think giving the higher seeded teams the first choice of the hotels is probably the most beneficial, because they're going to be there. The competitive teams are going to be there for like 3 months. So living in comfort or a little bit more comfort than everyone else might be somewhat advantageous to the players. But, if I was in charge and I could make the rules, I think the best advantage to give the higher seeds, and the most interesting for fans as well, would be to let the higher seed teams pick their first round opponents. So the Bucks get to pick who they face in the first round. Then the second place team will get to pick who they face, and so on and so forth. I think that would be the most fun way, and it also reflects the advantage that you've gained by being the best team throughout the regular season, because you get to match up against the team you think that you're going to be able to beat the most easily, and it will put a chip on the shoulder of that first team that's picked. They'll be thinking, why did they pick us first? They must think we're terrible, and they're going to come out and play even harder. So that's my take, Adam Silver, if you're listening.
Do you think that would be consistent throughout the whole playoffs, or is it just for the first round?
Just for the first round, because then you get into the bracket.
So yeah. Okay.
The top four in each conference would be placed in a bracket, and then they just get to fill in their opponents, and then it goes down through that.
I think that's an interesting concept. You kept that one hidden from us. That's quite good. I'm not going to lie. That's actually not bad.
That is interesting.
Gentlemen, it's time. Y'all ready for Hot or Not?
Always.
Born ready.
Look, now that the live action has a projected date, we can start making our assumptions. We can start talking about our dream scenarios, and we can start dreaming more than anything else about the playoffs and the finals again. So Mo, I come to you because we have to look at the way things are sort of seeded up at this moment in time and the standings as they stand. And even though the 8 games is not a long time for anyone to make an impact in the regular season, I've been looking at this lockdown. I've been seeing some of the teams that have had a chance to recover health-wise. They would have veteran players and have to want to make a point more than anything else. And immediately, hot take, a healthy Portland Trailblazers with Melo, CJ, and Dame would be a dangerous 8th seed for the Lakers. What are you thinking?
That's a cold take. Man. This is a team that couldn't even make the 8th seed throughout the 65 games that they played already. But there's 3 reasons that I'll give you why, if I was the Lakers, I would not be worried at all about the Portland Trailblazers. The first one being, obviously, you talk about veterans coming back and players getting healthy. They would have Zach Collins and Yusuf Nurkic returning to the squad. Nurkic hasn't played all season, and Collins hasn't played since the team brought in Melo to replace him in the starting lineup. So now Coach Terry Stotts, with a shortened training camp than ever before, is going to have to integrate 2 new players into the squad and manage Hassan Whiteside and Carmelo Anthony, who, if you put them onto the bench, how do you think that those 2 guys who have been stars throughout pretty much their whole careers are going to react to that? And how is Nurkic and Collins going to shake off the rust? So is the team chemistry going to be there? Because they've not played as a unit since last season. So that's the first point. The second point would be looking at the matchups. When you look at the strengths of the Lakers in LeBron and AD, who on the Portland Trailblazers is going to guard them? Trevor Ariza may have been a great defender in 2010, but it's 2020 now. That he's not going to stop LeBron, right? And then you look at Dame and CJ, the best options. The best options for the Trailblazers, Dame and CJ. When you look at one of the Lakers' strengths is, although they might not have a great ball handler in that backcourt, they've got Danny Green and Avery Bradley, who are 2 fantastic perimeter defenders. So they can simply focus on guarding Dame and CJ, and they don't even have to worry about carrying too much of the load on offense because they're more just spot-up shooters. And then, the third reason would be if you can cast your minds back to 2018. The Portland Trailblazers were swept out of the playoffs by the New Orleans Pelicans, right? That New Orleans Pelicans team had 2 key players during that series. Number 1, Mr. Anthony Davis, and number 2, Mr. Rajon Rondo, who are both now on the Lakers. Now, were the Portland Trailblazers better in 2018 than they are now? Most definitely. And are the Lakers better than the 2018 New Orleans Pelicans? Most definitely. So if they were swept away by the Pelicans team that didn't even have DeMarcus Cousins and Rondo, because you got to remember, regular season Rondo and playoff Rondo are 2 completely different animals. Rondo outplayed Dame in that series. They swept them out. I don't think the Lakers are at all worried about the Portland Trailblazers.
Ovie, he talks about regular season Rondo, but I will just remind Mo of one thing. When Dame points at his watch, it's dangerous for the whole NBA. Yeah, so I'm going to come to you again with exactly the same take. Yeah, how are you feeling about the Portland Trailblazers potentially matching up against the Lakers?
Without fluffing up my answer too much, I'm going to keep it really simple. It's a cold take. Ultimately, I don't think that the Portland Trailblazers, healthy or not, are going to be able to make up the gap between them and the Lakers. Is Dame going to show up in playoff time? Yeah, we know that. But is that enough with a couple guys who are just coming back off injuries and haven't adjusted to game speed, haven't played in game situations yet? Is that going to be enough to beat a Lakers team, which in my opinion is the best team in the NBA? I don't think so. So yeah, no, that's a cold take.
But is overconfidence not a problem here? I'm just thinking about if the Trailblazers come out sharp, ready, good to go because they have a point to prove anyway because they've got to get themselves into the 8th seed. So I'm just asking you both.
As much as Portland have had time to rest and recover, so has LeBron James, who is, in my opinion, still up there, still the best player, in the game, arguably. So yeah.
But I have to get your opinion on the potential of this 8th seed final determination in terms of the standings. We spoke about the play-in tournament, and right now the positions are being held by both the Magic and the Grizzlies. But if anybody in the 9th seed is within 4 games, we spoke about this play-in tournament off camera, but I really do want to find out if you think that it's fair that this is actually being brought in as a suggestion this season. Because in my opinion, I think it's actually really harsh on both the Grizzlies and the Magic, who've worked hard throughout the regular season so far.
I get where you're coming from. It's a little bit unfair on the Grizzlies in that they've got far more opponents coming for their spot than the Orlando Magic, who just have one opponent coming from their spot. But I don't think it's unfair at all because none of these teams qualified for the playoffs. Yeah, they were in the 8th seed, but they hadn't secured their spot when the season had ended. So, you can't just say that you deserve a spot in the playoffs because after 65 games, you happen to be in the 8th seed. Like, if you want to look at the Memphis Grizzlies, they were only 3 games ahead of the 9th place team. So say the season had been cancelled a week later and they had lost the 3 games in that week and their opponents had won the 3 games in that week, they wouldn't be sitting in the 8th spot. It would be someone else. So to get to the playoffs, you have to win basketball games. And you can't sit around complaining, this is unfair, we were the 8th seed when the season ended. All you got to do is win basketball games and secure your spot. Because at the end of the day, if you're incapable of winning these 8 playing games and securing your spot in the postseason, then you don't belong there anyway. So I don't think it's unfair because in basketball, you've got to win to achieve success. You can't just be fortunate because of the circumstances you found yourself in that you happen to be the 8th seed on the day the season was cancelled. You got to win. So they got to prove that they really should be that number 8 spot.
I think people are disregarding the whole 75% of the season that has already taken place. And I just look at, for example, someone like the Orlando Magic, obviously no bias whatsoever, and the Memphis Grizzlies. Would you not feel that they would feel aggrieved with this potential if you're within 4 games of my team and you get an opportunity to play me twice? Like, surely they would look at it and say to themselves, well, we've worked hard to get ourselves in this position.
To be fair, I think it's probably a little bit more unfair on Orlando. But I don't feel sorry for either of them. But the reason why I say that is just because, Orlando is in a weaker conference. In the West, I really feel like it was at a point where we still don't really know what could have happened. In the East, there's hardly any competition outside of the playoff teams, outside of those playoff spots anyway. So, I think this rule, as much as I don't really feel sorry for them, I definitely feel like Orlando probably got the shorter end of the stick. Memphis, as much as I love Ja Morant, as much as I love what they've been able to achieve this season, they weren't, solidified in the playoffs. They didn't have a guaranteed spot in the playoffs, and we do know how competitive that Western Conference is. So, ultimately, I don't think it's fair for Orlando. For Memphis, hey, it's just the nature of the beast. You're in the West. You're in the best. You're on the better side.
Ovie, I have to ask you then, does that mean that you're, as a Phoenix Suns fan, you're overjoyed with the potential that you could still creep into the playoffs?
No,
even though
absolutely.
You are 6 games back at this point?
Absolutely, but it just shows, if you look at the schedule, if you look at the lineup and just look at how many more teams have filled up these spaces from the West, it just lets you know that there is still a lot of really competitive basketball to be played on the West, and I can't say the same for the East.
If the season had played out to the 82 games, from this point forward, the Grizzlies had the hardest remaining schedule, whereas the Pelicans, who were coming for their spot, had the second easiest remaining schedule. And if this 82 games were played out regularly, there wouldn't be a play-in tournament for the Grizzlies to try and get their spot in the postseason. So whilst they're complaining, I think they have more chance of making the playoffs through this format than they would have if we had just continued the regular season.
In the midst of all of this, I know we're in the middle of a pandemic and developments are still very new and everything else. We seem to have just missed one important component that I was really looking forward to the conclusion of this season. And that is the retirement of the legend that is Vince Carter. Now, he's not going to get the farewell ceremony he deserves because naturally, as you just spoke about, the Atlanta Hawks are not returning. But how do we give Vince Carter the send-off he deserves? And I look at it this way. I know there's numerous layers to talk about with Vince Carter's career, and we'll dive into it. But I just want to say, we saw the final 3-point shot in the Hawks jersey, but that is not enough. And I think we need to bring him back for a proper goodbye ceremony. Hot take. Mo, the nostalgia aspect of me is taking over here. So you tell me, have I got some legs with this one?
You say the nostalgia aspect has taken over, and I think that's very true because I think right now we're at a point where everyone's looking back very fondly on the career of Vince Carter without looking at the actual facts of what happened. So in my opinion, if you want to honor him, then, do it at All-Star Weekend. Do it during the dunk contest or do it during his Hall of Fame ceremony. The reason why I say this is because, we've all seen the farewell tours for Dwayne Wade, the last, his last tour around the league, Dirk Nowitzki, obviously the late, great Kobe Bryant with the Lakers. These guys all got proper farewell send-offs because they spent almost their entire careers with just one franchise. Vince Carter has not done that. So when you talk about giving him a proper send-off, is it going to be with the Atlanta Hawks where he spent 2 seasons averaging 6 points in 16 minutes a night? Or, which team do you think, where would you want to see him getting that proper send-off?
Raptors.
See, that's interesting. That's
Raptors.
Interesting because now, after Drake has made Toronto cool again, or for the first time, people are looking back at the impact of what Vince Carter did. But do you guys remember how he ended things in Toronto? If you talk to any older Toronto fans, the city of Toronto does not have nice words for Vince Carter.
I'm not talking about how he left.
I'm talking about his legacy in the city.
I'm talking about what he did. What he did for that city, though, is undeniable.
What did he do?
Before he was there, basketball in Toronto, it wasn't a big thing. It wasn't a big deal at all. Vince Carter literally put them on the map, in my opinion. Now, it wasn't through winning championships, and it wasn't through a lot of these accolades where you might regard higher or take a little bit more seriously. No, but what he done with his style of play, with his excitement, and just being one of the biggest names in the NBA around that time, it was huge for the city. It was absolutely huge. Before that, it's really only ice hockey that people were talking about.
He spent 6 seasons in Toronto. As soon as he was drafted, he became the face of the franchise immediately. In his 3rd season, he was putting up 27 points a game. But after that 3rd season, in Toronto, I don't want to disrespect Vince Carter or anything like that because I think he's a legend of this league. But the fans in Toronto call him a quitter because he was unhappy with the team that they put around him and he forced his way out. And he's even admitted himself in an interview that he didn't try as hard as he should have. And you can noticeably see the difference in his play in those final 2 or 3 seasons in Toronto that he wasn't giving it his all. He even had one interview where he said, "I'm not going to dunk anymore." And he said, "What's the point? I can get 2 points for a layup." And then you can even see statistically his free throw attempts dropped off. He was just less aggressive when he played. He basically gave up on that team in the city and forced his way out to the New Jersey Nets in a trade that was absolutely terrible for Toronto. So yeah, I get by him being such an exciting dunker, fantastic, great. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves to watch it, But if you're looking at the franchise itself, did he really help them? Because even though we criticized LeBron for leaving the Cavs, he left in free agency. Vince forced his way out, and he almost, some would say, tanked his way out of that team. So when you talk to the actual Raptor fans who were there and lived through it, I think their perspectives are very different from the fans of the rest of the league and guys like us who grew up watching the amazing dunks of Vince Carter and that kind of thing. We have kind of this this positive glow around everything he does. And like Jaydee said earlier, the nostalgia has really taken over. So I think he should be honoured at an All-Star weekend or a Hall of Fame, but I don't think that Toronto would be the place to give him that send-off. Unless he went and played one more season in Toronto before he retired, then it would make sense. But because of the bad terms he left the city on, I can't see that happening.
What we can see in, that whole back and forth that he had with, Toronto when he was there, was that he made a city believe that it was possible. He made them believe that they could reach heights that before he got there, it wasn't even on anyone's mind. Like, no one, do you know what I mean? It wasn't a thing to go and play in Toronto. So, for him to give and give a belief like that
it's
to a
still
city,
not a thing.
It's what?
It's still not a thing to go and play in Toronto. Which free agents have ever signed in Toronto?
Whoa. You're talking. Players love it out there in Toronto.
Which free agents have signed in Toronto? Which big name free agents have ever signed in Toronto in the past 20 years since he left?
Kawhi literally.
He got traded there. Got traded there. No one signed in Toronto because they want to be in Toronto. DeRozan was drafted.
No, bro.
Kawhi was traded. No one signed in Toronto because they like Vince Carter and they think it's cool.
No. He made that city a place where NBA players like to go and play, regardless of signing or not. Okay, but he made.
But why do none of them go there then?
He brought like, maybe they don't feel like they can win there. If you're talking about big time superstars who are trying to go somewhere to win a championship, okay, even regardless of liking a city or not, that if you're trying to win, yeah, you're not going to go to the city that you might necessarily just like the most. Atlanta's a great city, and I'm sure if you ask a lot of NBA players, do you love the city and is it a thing to go to Atlanta? A lot of them would say yes. Would the biggest superstars sign there? Probably not, because you're probably not going to win it. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of different aspects when you talk about exactly.
Is Vince Carter a Hall of Famer? Like guaranteed shoo-in? Because we've spoken on this show about players that have missed out. Now, do you put Vince Carter in that realm of someone who is going to be maybe someone that we're still talking about in 4 or 5 years as a Hall of Famer?
I definitely think Vince Carter should be in the Hall of Fame. The difference for me is the Hall of Fame is based on his entire basketball career through his entire life. And, the points that Ovie made about what he did for basketball in Canada and in Toronto, absolutely huge. He underachieved in Toronto, despite his off-the-court legacy and, the entertainment side of things, in terms of actual winning, didn't really win much there. He went to the Nets, didn't even crack a 50-win season. They made the finals back-to-back seasons before he even arrived there. And after he left the Nets, he was just bouncing around and rebranded himself as a role player wherever he went. But as an overall body of work, 22 seasons in the NBA, the longevity of it, and, obviously the things he's done in All-Star Weekend, and he's become, a global household name. I do think he will definitely be in the Hall of Fame. But in terms of a send-off from a team, I don't think there's one franchise that stands out that would honor him in that way.
Maybe things didn't finish the way a lot of Toronto fans would have liked and preferred. But still, just for what he done for that city and that sport in Canada, you have to respect that and you have to acknowledge that, in my opinion. Without Vince Carter, I don't know if the culture of basketball, ever really, becomes a big deal in Canada. And since then, they have a solid fan base and it's a solid market.
So if you were the owner of a team, you would retire the jersey of a player who's openly admitted they didn't try as hard as they could have, forced their way out of the team and forced you to make a bad trade just so that they could leave. You would feel comfortable retiring their jersey.
If that player created that market for them there, then I would. For what he's done for the sport in that country, yes, I would.
Look, more than anything else, let's make sure we get most some tickets for when that retirement jersey does happen in Toronto. If it does happen.
I'm more than happy for them to prove me wrong. I'm more than happy. I'll be there in my Vince Carter jersey if they prove me wrong. I'll hold my hands up.
Look, the Chicago Bulls have gathered so much attention following the last dance, and rightfully so. If you're a 90s baby like myself, you love this game, and it's impossible to not think about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. But at the same time, when you think about their progression post-Jordan, really, how far have they come? And our guy Mo had a real deeper look.
If you're new to the world of the NBA and you've just watched The Last Dance, you saw the lofty heights of success that the Chicago Bulls reached in the 90s, and no one would blame you for thinking that they used the success of Michael Jordan's teams to springboard into an era of dominance. Unfortunately, that couldn't be further from the truth. So how did a franchise go from 6 championships in 8 years to becoming an opponent that most other NBA teams look at as an easy win on the schedule? Just 1 week after winning the 1998 NBA championship, head coach Phil Jackson resigned from his position. Sticking to his word, Michael Jordan wouldn't come back to play for another coach, so he retired in January 1999. Following this, Dennis Rodman was released, Steve Kerr was sent to the San Antonio Spurs in a sign and trade, and Scottie Pippen was sent to the Houston Rockets also in a sign and trade. So after clearing house, the Bulls had a dreadful season, winning just 13 games and finishing dead last in the Eastern Conference. Now, let's skip forward a few years, as the Bulls wouldn't make the playoffs again until the 2004-2005 season. 2 names that British fans will be familiar with, Luol Deng and Ben Gordon, both came in as rookies and teamed up with Argentinian international Andres Nocioni to carry the Chicago Bulls to the 4th seed. Ben Gordon even picked up 6th Man of the Year honours, becoming the only rookie to do so, but the Bulls would go on to lose to the Washington Wizards in the first round and would suffer early exits from the playoffs over the next 2 seasons. Now let's look to 2007. The Bulls missed the playoffs but managed to secure the number 1 pick in the 2008 NBA draft. They selected Chicago native Derrick Rose, who made an immediate impact, carrying the Bulls into the playoffs and winning the Rookie of the Year award. D. Rose was the youngest MVP in league history in the 2010-11 season and led the Bulls to the Eastern Conference Finals. The following season, the Bulls had the best record in the league and were looking to make a run at the finals when tragedy struck in the first game of the playoffs. Rose tore his ACL in Game 1 against the Sixers, and the number 1 seed Bulls lost in the first round. Rose missed the entirety of the following season, but the team still managed to finish 5th and make it to the Eastern Conference semis, but their championship edge was gone. Rose would return the following season, but tore his meniscus just 10 days into the campaign. Jimmy Butler emerged as the league's most improved player, but that still wasn't enough to take down LeBron James's Cavaliers in 2015. In 2016, Derrick Rose was eventually traded to the New York Knicks for, well, not much in return. And Jimmy Butler, along with Chicago's own first-round pick, was traded to the Timberwolves in exchange for Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and the pick that would become Lauri Markkanen. LaVine was acquired by the Bulls despite tearing his ACL earlier that year. Dunn has been a huge disappointment, and Markkanen has failed to live up to the level of play displayed by his fellow European prospects. So that's how the Bulls went from the best team of all time to, well, their current state. Bad luck has had a role to play, but I think more so is poor decision-making. Earlier this month, Chicago restructured their front office and hired Mark Eversley to be their new general manager. With no great young prospects, the future doesn't look too bright in the Windy City. But will the allure and inspiration of the Last Dance documentary help them to recruit stars in free agency? Only time will tell.
Man, I love the insight, Mr. Mincy, and I have to give you the opportunity to retort and to explain your sort of thought process behind it, because a lot of people would look at the Bulls and say they're an attractive prospect, but you're kind of saying maybe the potential complete opposite. What do you think they need if the new GM, Mark Eversley, is going to make the Chicago Bulls a heavy hitting power again?
You know, it's an interesting situation because I feel like that change of management in Chicago has been way overdue. I think, you know, they've got to look at their coaching options, go with someone that the players actually want to play for. Because one thing that stood out to me this season is you would see the Chicago Bulls coach and Zach LaVine arguing late in the 4th quarter. They'd be arguing in and amongst themselves. So I feel like they need to find a coach that the players really want to give their all for on the court and actually respect and play for fully. And then they really have to make some decisions. Do they see a future with LaVine and Markkanen? Kobe White, I think, was a very solid pick for them. But going forwards, who is really going to be the building blocks? Are you going to be happy with guys that turn out to be borderline all-stars, or are you going to try and retool and go for guys that can actually reach, you know, the level that we saw Derrick Rose reach before he got injured? So obviously they've been unlucky with the whole Derrick Rose situation. And I think the way we look at the Bulls would be completely different if he had, you know, a clear bill of health and didn't have all those problems during his career. So it's an unfortunate situation for them to be in. But at the same time, they've made quite a few questionable decisions since that point.
I ask you, do you kind of change direction at this point? Do you try and build a new face of your franchise, or do you continue to build behind LaVine?
Absolutely. Get him out of there, man. as much as I feel like he's an absolutely terrific player, he's an
Like that.
undeniable talent. But I genuinely don't feel like he's a guy that you build around. He isn't someone who you want to build your culture around because he hasn't shown those qualities as the face of a franchise. So hold on, sorry, can we run that back?
No, your brother's there. It's all right. I think he's just a bit upset that you were shouting out Zach Levine like that. In fairness,
No. Let me run
it's
that
just
back.
no, it's cool. I think he was just a bit upset that you were shouting out Zach Levine. And Mo, I have to ask
No.
you. But then, if he's not happy with Zach Levine, then who do you turn around and want to make that face? Then I mean, you got
Oh,
Wendell
I'm not
Carter. who's the
finished. I'm
depth.
not finished.
All
I'm
right, go
so
for it then. I
sorry.
mean,
Let me
you
run
made your
that
brother
back.
vex. That's what it was. Your brother had to step in and think to himself, is he talking about Zach like
It,
that? Yeah?
no, it's one of those things where you want to build your culture, and it might not necessarily be around a mega star. But one thing, when you do look at that team that was successful with Derrick Rose, and even the team leading up to the time he got there, you had guys that came from programs that were built on a very, very solid culture. Ben Gordon coming from UConn, you had Dan coming from a Duke program, and you had Joakim Noah coming from a Florida program. All of which were coached by Hall of Fame coaches, and all of these guys had a certain culture instilled in them. And this, I feel like, transferred onto the NBA level, and it allowed a mega star like Derrick Rose to now come in and fit into that culture and really shine. But now they don't have that culture as a basis. So regardless of the players they bring in, I just don't know if it can work until you get those those positions sort of squared away.
Well, Mo, clearly Ovie's brother doesn't agree with Zach Levine. He obviously wanted to vocalize his opinions on the Heatcheck. But I do come to you as well and I ask you, look, I like Wendell Carter, like I was saying, his advanced footwork. I like his sort of defensive instincts and all the rest of it. But maybe he's a bit undersized. But like, I ask you, if you're not going to be behind Zach Levine as the face of your franchise, who do you make the face of the franchise then, my friend?
I think it's going to take a few years. You're going to have to go back through the drafting process. Obviously, that's quite easy for them. Being in the lower end of the Eastern Conference, they do tend to get quite solid draft picks. But going back to what Ovie said about the culture, not only did those players that he mentioned come from great programs, they were also very, very tough guys. They were no nonsense. They were like dogs on the court. Do you know what I mean? Like, they wouldn't take any nonsense. Jimmy Butler, ferocious defender. Joakim Noah, Defensive Player of the Year candidate year after year. Luol Deng, obviously the OG representing the UK, but he was a fierce compare. Ben Gordon, absolute killer on the court. Whereas now you look at the guys they've got on the roster, they're a little bit soft. I don't think anyone goes into the United Center and thinks, damn, we got to play the Bulls tonight. I think players are looking at it like, cool, we'll play, probably pick up the win. So I feel like they've got to start picking guys and get that identity back, because if you look at Jordan's Bulls and the players that I just mentioned, they were all very fierce compares, very tough guys. So I feel like they really need to look at finding someone who's got a big personality like that and can instill that culture into the locker room. Or, as I said earlier, finding a coach who can do that same thing.
I'm still trying to work out the difference between LeBron James at the point guard position and LeBron James at the small forward position. I'm still racking my brain about it. I feel like this week is going to be a lot easier. I feel like this week is going to be a lot more straightforward. I do have some curveballs for you guys, but we are going to focus on the shooting guard position. Now, I think my question should be to both of you. Have either of you got anybody that isn't Michael Jeffrey Jordan?
I feel like this doesn't really need explaining, but I will explain anyway. His MVPs is, three-peat, and to be able to do that, literally after taking seasons off, to go and just try and, play baseball for a little bit at a professional level, why not? Just his sheer dominance across his complete entire time he was in the NBA. He was giving them hell when he got into the league, and he left, absolutely breaking records, from start to finish. I feel like MJ is the only person I could go with comfortably.
My question still stands. Yeah. Who have you got in the shooting guard position?
Shooting guard. Not a 3, not a 4, shooting guard.
I'm interested.
Well, first things first, if we're going to talk about great shooting guards, the first thing that needs to be said is to rest in peace to the legendary Kobe Bryant, because no conversation about great shooting guards can ever happen without Kobe's name being mentioned. MJ himself even said that Kobe would beat him one-on-one, but we're not talking about one-on-ones. We're talking about a starting five. And for that reason, Michael Jordan is the only acceptable answer for this question.
See, the thing is, it's so interesting you bring up Mr. Kobe Bean Bryant, because what if I said to you, look, we all seen Jordan's dominance. There's no two ways about it. Jordan's peak was incredible. But in terms of a longevity, 20 years at a franchise, being the face of that franchise as well for a long part of it, and also elevating the purple and gold to many modern NBA fans, can Kobe Bryant turn around and stake a claim to turn around and say that he could potentially be the shooting guard in our all-time starting five at all? I'm just asking a question.
Kobe's great, and I don't even really want to get into that. Kobe, Jordan, they're both absolutely, their bodies of work speak for itself. But I don't think there's a Kobe without an MJ, and that's the only reason for me why you got to go with MJ. It's almost like going with the master. Do you know what I mean? The student, regardless of, how good he may have gotten, whether he might have surpassed him one day or not, there wouldn't have been a student if there wasn't a master. And I do genuinely believe that MJ, was the master and someone that Kobe studied and tried to emulate his game after. So, that's why I have to go with MJ.
Mo, the only reason why I bring up Kobe's name, is because you like stats. Now listen to this one for a stat.
Go for
18 years in the NBA, Kobe Bryant. And taking out his first year and his last year, averaged 26.4 points. Now, when I turn around and bring that to you on a longevity aspect, if we're talking about the all-time starting five, I'm just asking you, can Mr. Kobe Bean Bryant be selected?
Well, if we're going to look at it statistically in that way, it's very arbitrary to remove the first and final seasons from a player's career because they are part of the player's career. Secondly, if you look at Michael Jordan's scoring average throughout his career, it's significantly higher.
Was there any need for the shade?
He's only like a tiny bit behind Michael Jordan in this race, but Michael Jordan is the GOAT. If we're being completely honest, how are you going to leave the GOAT off an all-time starting five? It's not a disrespect to Kobe Bryant, who was an amazing, legendary player in his own right. He just so happened to play the same position as the greatest basketball player of all time. So it's not a disrespect to Kobe and saying anything negative about him. It's more of a credit to the greatness of Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan is the GOAT that is a ghost you can never catch. Like, you might be able to see it in the distance, but you can never catch it. No one can. It can't be caught. It's not possible.
The shooting guard position is the easiest one, and I think the most clear-cut decision for anyone to pick. Because
for sure.
Look at what Michael Jordan's done for the NBA. If Michael Jordan never came along and put the NBA on a worldwide stage like he did, would we all be sitting here right now doing this? Because
debatable.
What he did for the game of basketball across the world is more than any player has ever done, arguably in any sport.
When you put it like that and you bring the personal aspect from ourselves, it kind of does make it a compromising argument. All I'm gonna say to you though, next week the debate starts again because we actually do miss the small forward and we're going to do the power forward next week. We will come back to the small forward, but I know that's going to be a real topic for debate.
You give him more time to pick someone else.
I'm just think he needs to be given time to think about who he wants to replace instead of LeBron James at the small forward. I just given him an extra week. That's my gift to my hobby. Yeah. So we're going to focus on the power forward next week.
I got my lineup. What are you telling me?
I'm ready for anything.
I got my lineup.
Let me get this right. You've both got your lineups planned already, good to go.
Lineup is ready.
You know the vibes.
Say no more.
And I'll just whack my free man on his point guard and just cancel that whole matchup out.
I've got to give you a chance to respond to that. I've got to give you a chance to respond. I just want to say, now you've had time to think about it. Have you still got LeBron James?
I don't want to say too much because I want fans to tune in and find out who I put at the free. But all I'm saying is if you're using your three man to guard my point guard, your team is done for, my friend.
All right. If you say so.
Like
My
I
point
said,
guard is six. My point guard is like 6'7", 6'8", 6. You know, so
the debate will rumble on.
That's cool.
Stay with us,
That's
Heatcheck
cool.
fans. As you can
That's
see, these two will be continuing on that debate. But more short-term goals for us. The Heatcheck is back again next week, Tuesday, 12 p.m. on the Sky Sports YouTube channel. You know where to find us. And in case you miss us then, we are repeated again on the Wednesday evening, Sky Sports Arena, 8 p.m. Make sure you're there. And honestly, we cannot wait. The basketball action is literally around the corner. We now have a date finalized that we can work towards, that we can get you guys excited. Live action will be brought to your screens very, very soon. From my brothers, from myself, from all of the team as well, let's stay remain positive, let's stay safe, and we'll see y'all next week.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.